Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll begin the session in a minute now. Please stay with us. We are just waiting for a few more participants to join us as well. Yeah, so I think we have good participants already joined with us. So once again, hello everyone. Welcome to GDA Hub's Inclusity webinar series. I'm Balanakendran Marimuthu, Inclusive Climate Researcher at the Global Disability Innovation Hub. I'm a man in my early 30s and Indian by origin. Today I'm wearing a black polo t-shirt and have a stubble. On behalf of GDA Hub, it is my pleasure to be the host and presenter for this fourth session of our Inclusity webinar series titled as Climate Resilience and Innovation for Inclusive Cities. Before we dive deeper into the topic, here is a quick overview of agenda for the next 60 minutes. We hope you find this engaging and informative. I'll spend a couple of minutes to set the context and share some housekeeping rules. Following that, we have a short video capturing insights from our engagement at the Global Disability Summit earlier this year. I'll also then be presenting a few slides on how climate resilience and innovation sits within our wider work for inclusive cities and infrastructure. We will then spend the major part of this session to hear from our three brilliant speakers for today and discuss their work at this intersection of disability inclusion and climate action. Finally, we also have an opportunity for audience to share any questions. So through the session, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them at the Q&A box. I'll pick them up at the end. I would also like to highlight that we have live captioning available for this session if any of you would like to use it. Also, this session will be recorded and will be made available in GDA Hub's YouTube channel very soon. Having said that, in the previous two sessions, we discussed the need for and challenges in implementing inclusive infrastructure and services. In today's session, the fourth session, we would like to extend this dialogue through the lens of climate action. We are particularly keen to explore opportunities to embed disability inclusion within the narratives of climate adaptation, mitigation, resilience, and innovation, and also strongly position inclusive cities within the larger global just transition ambition. Specifically, the most of the insights that we present today will be from our research in the last 4 years. We will situate both our global comparison report and our global action report in the context of inclusive climate action. As I mentioned, to put this agenda in perspective, we would like to play a short video which captures lived experiences of disability from two different regional contexts, one from Canada and other from Maldives, as shared by Mark and Muthu. Over to the video now.
The Global Disability Innovation Hub recently attended the Global Disability Summit in Berlin, where we asked people about how their city shapes their daily life. Here is a snippet of what they had to say.
My name is Mark Workman. I'm the CEO of the World Blind Union. We're here at the Global Disability Summit at the Accessibility 2030 brief. And one of the questions we're talking to people about is how to make a city more inclusive. And one of the interesting dynamics that we face in northern countries like Canada is the snow. So it's a struggle when we get a large snowfall for people with disabilities, people like myself who rely on a white cane, or people who use wheelchairs to be able to get around the community after a snowfall. So one of the best ways in the wintertime to make the city more inclusive is to shovel that snow, make sure that it's not a barrier for people with disabilities longer than it absolutely needs to be. And so that's a thing that I would love to, and I do encourage cities to take seriously, is how can we remove the snow in the priority areas as quickly as possible. And the impact of not doing that is that people with disabilities are isolated, we're stuck at home, we may have a hard time getting to our places of employment or to our doctor's appointments. And so it makes a huge difference in our lives to be able to have the snow cleared in a timely fashion. And I think the role that we can play as people with disabilities is helping city officials understand where the priority areas might be, where there's the biggest sort of demand and need for the snow clearing. As people with disabilities, we understand where we're impacted in the biggest ways. And so we can provide important input into those decisions and make sure that they're helping everyone as much as possible.
Hi, my name is Muthu. I'm from the Maldives and I live in the Malay city, the capital of Maldives. And I don't think my city is accessible at all. It's crowded. It's in one word, it's chaos. There's too many cars, too many motorbikes. The pavement is tiny. When it rains, it floods. People who are visually impaired, they cannot be independent outside on the road. Uh, yeah, it's pretty fully packed. There's no space for pedestrians. I think we are very car centric. Like, we focus on vehicles a lot. So when we design our roads, we reduce the space given to the pedestrians. There's enough space for parking. There's enough space for cars to drive around. But I wouldn't recommend you guys walking around the city on your own. I think the first step is to make people understand that owning a car doesn't equate to being wealthy. And walking is much more healthier, but it needs to be a good, pleasant experience. Instead of cutting down more trees, I think we need to plant more trees, make it more walkable. It prevents me from being active. I want to be an active person, but because of the safety concerns, the pollution level, and just because it's crowded, I don't enjoy the experience of being alone in the city, or like even just going out for grocery shopping. I prefer to stay inside because it's more comfortable. We have tropical weather, so when you step outside with no trees, you're sweating all the time. So yeah, we are forced to stay inside rather than move around.
The global disability.
So the core message that we heard from Mark and Muthu were that people with disabilities need and have the right to equal participation in urban life. Whether it's snowfall or it's the floods, it impacts people with disabilities in an increased manner. So for that, it's important that we co-create our cities as inclusive as well as resilient places. And in the next few slides, we will take a quick look at how we at GDA Hub are working towards it. For anyone who is joining our webinar for the first time, the Global Disability Innovation Hub is both an academic research center and a community interest company hosted by the University College London. With disability innovation as our anchor, we work across sectors to accelerate ideas into impact for a more just world for disabled people and for all people. GDA Hub particularly delivers the UK International Development Funded flagship program called the AT2030 Assistive Technology 2030, which tests what works to improve access to assistive technology for all. So under the AT2030 program, we also have a sub-program called the Inclusive Infrastructure, as we recognize that access to and uninterrupted usage of assistive technology requires an inclusive and accessible built-in environment. Just having access to assistive technology doesn't really mean that people can use it. So this webinar series is being organized under the Inclusive Infrastructure sub-program, and we hope that this also extends our dialogue across other topic areas as well. So what we have done so far, through the last 4 years with local partnerships, we have built a global picture on inclusive infrastructure by particularly studying and documenting 6 case studies from 6 cities of low and middle income countries. We have developed 2 products. One is a global comparison report and a global action report. You can also see the list of cities in the map on the screen now, which includes Medellín from Colombia, Freetown from Sierra Leone, Nairobi from Kenya, Varanasi from India, Solo from Indonesia, and Ulaanbaatar from Mongolia. So this together has provided us insights to not just host this webinar series, but also to take these findings to the next level of piloting some of the actions. The most important of these all is the Global Action Report, which is giving us practical guidance on what to do next. So the Global Action Report is to equip cities and city practitioners in prioritizing actions for embedding accessibility and inclusive design across both physical infrastructure as well as other urban services. So the report defines the idea of an inclusive city from multiple perspectives, and also lists 10 principles and 16 action areas backed by case studies and evidence from our research. You can now scan the QR code on this slide to access the report and other related publications. The publications are also available in our website, which you'll be able to access them as well. So in the context of today's webinar, our Global Action Report defines an inclusive city also as a resilient city. So this perspective emerges from the background that cities' resilience capacity is determined by the resilience of marginalized communities, including the people with disabilities. So this perspective for us also emphasizes the need to break the silos across city departments and development goals and ensure inclusion and resilience are co-designed hand in hand. For example, as we reconstruct our streets to be flood resilient, similar to how Muthu was mentioning, we can also make sure the streets are redesigned in a way that it's accessible and inclusive. So how do we make sure as we make actions for climate change, we also incorporate and embed the principles of accessibility and inclusion. So we want that to happen as two parallel and also integrated actions. At GDA Hub, we are currently exploring such pathways for simultaneously planning and implementing accessibility and climate resilience at the local level. But why disability inclusive local climate action is crucial now? There could be multiple reasons. And here we would like to spotlight a few across the 4 mainstream climate strategies or narratives that is accepted across at multiple levels from national to city level. During climate emergencies, the mortality rate for people with disabilities are 2 to 4 times higher than people without disabilities. Also, people with disabilities are adversely impacted by slow onset events like heat stress. This makes disability inclusive disaster risk reduction as a necessary approach. Speaking of heat stress, in 2023, globally, an average of 26 days were excess extreme heat days. This clearly shows that the impact of climate change is no longer an inconvenience for a few days in a year, but we must prioritize investments for climate adaptation for a year-long resilience for all citizens. So when it comes to climate mitigation, research shows that people with disabilities are unlikely to be early adopters of clean energy systems and products. This is mainly because households of people with disabilities, particularly in low and middle income countries, are often poorer and experience adverse energy poverty. So when we need targeted disability inclusive interventions to also ensure clean energy access for people with disabilities. And finally, we have a lot of conversations around innovation across all the scales, from policy development to product design. However, the voices and lived experiences of people with disabilities are commonly excluded in these processes or in institutions where innovation is spoken about, which can potentially increase existing inequalities and also limit the opportunity for equal participation for people with disabilities. So these are some of the reasons, as I mentioned, which makes it important that we embed disability inclusion across all these narratives of climate action and strategies, which particularly are being implemented at the local level. And these insights that the previous slide showed some research-based facts and numbers, but these insights that we gathered from our city case studies also kind of reaffirm this. So we heard multiple participants in our workshops speak about the impact of climate change, and we have like a quick sample of quotes here. We heard from a resident of Nairobi that the drainage and sewer system are blocked during the rainy seasons and flows over to the house, which is a health and mobility risk. This emphasizes the need for adaptive and resilient urban infrastructure that responds to the changing intensity of climate events, like the frequency of rainfall or the flooding situation. What we heard from a resident of Freetown was a story of exclusion in decision making, which is also commonly observed. Persons with disability are normally excluded when responding to disasters, especially, and particularly from who are living in slum communities who experience adverse impact and vulnerability. And finally, we earlier mentioned about heat stress, but in this case of Ulaanbaatar's experience, what we also observe is how extreme winters equally become problematic. During winter, I take a taxi, I have to wait for a bus for a long time. So it is difficult for me to use the bus during winter time, says one of the respondents in our workshop. What this refers to is not just change in mode of transport, but the additional cost that people with disabilities incur due to lack of climate responsive infrastructure and services. So together, these quotes show how people and their places are not prepared to handle the impact of climate change, and why we need to integrate disability inclusion as we invest more in our cities for climate action. But what we think is this is not only a need or an urgency to kind of act on, this is also an opportunity. This is an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to simultaneously localize accessibility, and disability inclusion, along with climate resilience, as we prepare our cities for the future. What can this do for us is it helps us to realize the rights-based commitments of the UNCRPD alongside meeting the global temperature targets set in Paris Agreement. Together, this will encourage cities and communities to define, plan, implement, and monitor actions towards global development goals. And this is our final slide from GDA Hub. As we know, the big question is, how do we really do it? We know the reasoning for it. We know this is important to do it, and we also know it's an opportunity. We don't have all the answers now, to be honest, because our work is also in the stage of piloting and learning more. And we also want to continuously test and learn what works as we expand our work in this area. However, based on our work so far, we have identified 3 key strategies that should give us a kickstart. The first level of focus should be in changing our perspectives and processes. We encourage cities and city practitioners to place people, fairness, and equity at the center of your planning and development process. This will require proactively adopting inclusive and participatory action planning methods, testing community-led service provisioning models, and also rolling out targeted climate responsive social protection policies for people with disabilities. We will hear some examples on these from our speaker today. Next is get deeper understanding on disability inclusion and building evidence. This could start from mapping diverse and differential vulnerabilities being faced by people with disabilities, because we often face the challenge of not having disability disaggregated data to be able to make inclusive decision making. Both in the context of inclusive urban environment and changing climate, data becomes an important aspect. This will require spearheading community-led mapping activities because we do not have these big databases which covers disability data. Integrating disability-focused indicators for risk and vulnerability assessments within climate action programs, and also co-creating disability-inclusive local climate action plans. Again, we will hear how a community-level local climate action plan is possible from one of our speakers today. Finally, it is about using the processes and evidence to deliver inclusive climate resilient infrastructure. On this, we just would like to urge for a shift in our thinking from incremental alteration to transformative adaptation. It's time that we don't really look at these minor changes or smaller retrofits, but think about the larger transformative approaches for systemic change. For example, as we deploy low floor, low emission buses, which multiple cities are doing right now, it's also important that we make sure we provide accessible transport information and communication systems to meet our larger disability-related obligations. Across all these 3 strategies or all these 3 actions that I spoke about, there are 2 things that we shouldn't never miss. The first one, collaborating with people with disabilities and the organizations of people with disabilities, which is never an option, which should be proactively taken up across every step. The second point is we must prioritize investment, engagement, and implementation, particularly in informal settlements, because people who are living in those kind of settings have less resource to build resilience at both individual as well as at community level. So I know I have spoken a lot. So with these messages in the background, it is my pleasure now to introduce our speakers for today, who are going to share their wealth of knowledge in this area. Our first panelist is Dr. Emma Geen from the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership, UK. Emma uses her lived experience as a disabled woman with her background in climate activism to advocate for the community of disabled people in climate work. She is the Climate and Disability Program Associate for the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership, co-produced the world's first community climate action plan by and for disabled people. And she is also an advisor on the Sensing Climate Research Project at the University of Exeter. Thank you so much for joining us, Emma. The second panelist is Vidya Mohan Kumar. Vidya is an architect and urban designer from Chennai, India, with 20 years of experience advancing people-centric cities. She is a founder of Urban Design Collective. She blends participatory planning, active mobility, and innovative design strategies to reimagine urban futures with sustainability and equity at the core. We'll also hear more about her work from Chennai and India in this webinar. Thanks a lot, Vidya. And the third and our final panelist for today is Pragya Pradhan. Pragya is the Habitat Program Manager at UN Habitat Nepal. Pragya brings more than 15 years of experience of working in urban and regional planning, inclusion and climate resilience, disaster recovery, and heritage conservation sectors. Pragya holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Hawaii. Thank you so much, Pragya. We are really glad to have all the three panelists today who have experience in different contexts and also from different positions of work. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we dive deeper into each of your works, I would like to start with a very simple question. Is there one project in your city that you think is accessible, inclusive, and climate resilient? Do you see such a synergy happening in any of your projects in the city? Not necessarily a project that you have implemented, but any of the projects that are being implemented by your city. Happy for you to just unmute yourself and answer, but please keep in mind that this is a very quick question, so your response could also be very brief so that we can discuss more on your projects later on. Vidya, you would like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to go first. So in Chennai, where I'm based in, I think the project that I'm going to be talking a little bit more about, which is the accessible beach pathway on Chennai's Marina Beach, is a project that embodies these principles. I think it's a landmark project in the city's evolving narrative of inclusive urbanism. More later.
Thank you so much, Vidya. Pragya, would you like to share next?
Yes, sure. Just want to highlight one project that we're implementing in Nepal together with UNOPS and Cities Alliance. The project is called Cities for Women, where women symbolically represents inclusion, and also noting the fact that the intersectionality where women and girls with disabilities from marginalized communities are more vulnerable due to our social construct. And the project is mainly focused on bringing these communities into the municipal structured planning process so that their voices and their requirements are integrated into the planning process and comes out as projects in which they're engaged to co-design the project itself and to see through its implementation. In terms of inclusion perspective, this project focuses on, and our entry point is generating projects that are more focused on public open spaces that serves wider requirements and needs. And when we talk about public open spaces, it has also provided us with opportunity to build in climate resilience component into it, where we have brought in the assessments and data from climate risk vulnerability to design public spaces with them to fulfill the requirements, but also to bring in design elements that helps in mitigating the risk of heat and flood.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Pragya. Over to you, Emma.
Hiya, just a very quick audio description. I'm a white woman in her 30s with long brown hair and wearing a yellow shirt. I wanted to talk about the charity Your Park, which is doing work to make parks in the city more accessible. So a big part of the city's heat resilient plan is kind of access to green space, but currently 1 in 4 people in Bristol can't access the parks, which is a large number of disabled people and carers, because there's just a whole bunch of barriers to getting into them. So obviously, to kind of change this takes a huge amount of kind of like access audits, money to make the changes. So to try and make that more possible, Your Park has been creating a toolkit that local communities can use to work with local disabled people to kind of create a vision and a plan about the kind of like a kind of community-led access audit about how to change that park, which is also really great for working with funders, because funders want to know that there's like community support behind projects. So they've just finished their first adaptation of one of their parks, and they're moving on to doing more and more. So I think it's really great to put power in the hands of local disabled people to say how we want these accessibility and kind of climate resilience pieces to be done.
Thank you so much, Emma. I think these examples give us some hope to look at accessibility and climate resilience in an integrated way. I'm also happy that all the cities have such examples, at least 1 or 2 to start off with. Now to discuss in a bit more detail, we are getting into specific questions for our panelists, but this also is a time for me to remind our audience, if you have any questions throughout the session, please drop them in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We'll pick them at the very end. So Emma, over to you. I'd like to start from you. You have played a key role in preparing the Bristol's Disability Community Action Plan. Can you please share more about the process of creating the action plan itself? And also, what are the different engagement methods that you had employed in making it a collaborative process?
Thank you. Yes, so we launched our plan in 2022, and to our knowledge, it was the first in the world then, but certainly in the UK, and we're kind of, it's something we were proud about, but also it's kind of like a real shame really that at this day and age that disabled people are, we're still really trying to be brought into the conversation around climate change. So this work was part of a lottery funded project called the Community Climate Action Project, which was supporting marginalised communities across the city of Bristol to make community climate action plans. So just in case anybody doesn't know what a community climate action plan is, that's basically a plan where communities get together to kind of think out how can we help kind of, take action on climate change, reach the city's climate goals, while also creating benefits for the community. This is very much about co-production. So what does the local community want? That making sure that the work is led by the local community. So everybody who worked on the project was the disabled person themselves. We had a year of engagement to kind of try and, get as many views as possible. At this time, this was work done by disabled people's organisation called BDF. It was a lot of the engagement period was during the lockdown period, so the city would kind of open up and then close down again. So the engagement processes, we were trying to make them as wide as possible and many different kind of methods of reaching people as possible, which is partly due to the lockdown, but also just in terms of different people find different ways of different forms of engagement accessible to them or more interesting to engage with. So we had a kind of video to launch the project which explained it with a survey. We had obviously paper copies of that as well as an online one where there were disability organizations that would still kind of open up, letting people in despite the kind of pandemic restrictions. We went in and gave presentations. I had what I called a sofa stall, which is where I was tracking a sofa around the city and putting it outside of supermarkets and GPs, where places where disabled people were still going, and say, oh, come and sit with me, have a cup of tea, and tell me what your thoughts are on sort of how we should do this work. And finally, we had what we called sharing sessions. So we found a lot of the difficulty around this work was, disabled people don't have necessarily a really good understanding of kind of how climate action can happen, and people who tend to work in the environmental sensitive sector just don't have a very good understanding of the needs of disabled people. So we're well, let's get the people with these two expertise together, share the problems, share what's happening, and then kind of find some solutions together. So that's how we came up with the work and the plan. I think our plan is a little bit different than the other communities in terms of we had some priorities about what our community would do, but it was all very, very clear through the kind of process that actually a lot of the changes we need for disabled people to be able to take more climate action really requires kind of work from the city. So for example, I know in the video was talking about that need for to be able to walk around and need better pavements and traffic, that kind of thing. That's very much the case in Bristol as well. For more disabled people to sort of drive less, and obviously not everybody's going to have that choice not to drive. We need all of us, we need better pavements across the city, and I as an individual disabled person or even my charity cannot do that. That's work that needs to come from the council. So yes, it was a lot of this is what we need people to do for us, so us as disabled people can take part in this work. We are now have been updating the plan this last year, partly because of that kind of awkward engagement process during the lockdowns, but also because this knowledge of disability and climate change is advancing all the time. And we did that work with a paid group of 10 disabled people as part of a forum, now sitting with Bristol Climate Nature Partnership, and we went through each section of the plan and kind of really rigorously said, okay, how do we make this as strong as possible? We've also also had a few projects to start bringing that first version of the plan to life. So we've had some strategic roundtables, bringing together like disabled people's organisations with power holders and key strategic people from across the city and broader to say, okay, how do we make this stuff happen? From those sessions, we're creating a set of resources for the council to say, like, when you're starting a transport project or an energy project, this is what to think about to make sure your work is accessible to disabled people. We've been doing some energy research with a charity called the Centre for Sustainable Energy to think about how, when the city's transitioning to kind of sustainable energy, how can we like make sure disabled people aren't have new barriers created for us around that. We're like particularly worried about heat pumps, but also like how can we create benefits for that? We've got an inclusive transport advocate who's been looking at how can, going into spaces where there's conversations about sustainable transport to say, how can we make this accessible at the same time? Because then disabled people will be able to use it and then take part in that kind of transport transition. We've had some creative projects to try and bring it all to life a bit more. We've had a forum theatre on the accessibility of buses, and a wonderful activist called Ruth Naughty is creating a series of podcasts for us on the intersection of climate, race and disability. And we have commissioned a local community garden called Red Catch to do some food growing lessons and cookery lessons. And they're also doing some planting of kind of plants that clean the air. And making frozen meals to kind of hand out to local disabled people to kind of do a kind of more sort of fingers in the earth type of action on all this climate work. And we're very happy to say that in 2026, we're going to be expanding our work into the West of England area. So to try and say, okay, this is how we've done climate work with disabled people in Bristol. Now let's kind of take our learnings, spread it outwards, get a community climate action plan for that area and try and make, sort of expand wider and see if we can actually get this work accessible in other places as well.
Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing that. I've also now shared the link for the action plan in the chat box for our audience. Please have a look at that. I'm sure this will inspire more cities as you also scale up to other communities and areas. I personally kind of want to highlight two things that you mentioned. One, why it is not enough to just look at one method, like one workshop is never enough. We need to look at multiple methods because different methods are accessible for different people and different people with disabilities. That is one. And second thing also, it was really exciting to see how you work across sectors, like from energy to food to streets to transport to other sectors as well. So it's not focused on one sector. You're looking at a package of solutions cutting across climate resilience and infrastructure. So thanks a lot. We'll come back to you at the end with more questions from the audience as well. Now I'd like to move on to our next panelist, Vidya, who have more experience working on ground from infrastructure perspective as a consultant. So over to you, Vidya. But what I want to ask you is, look, what are the challenges that you have faced in implementing infrastructure on ground in India? And how do you think we can navigate them? Like any learnings and lessons from your work experience would be really useful here.
Sure. Thanks, Bala. I'll come back to your question at the, after I'm sort of done introducing this project that, even for us at Urban Design Collective, set off our journey into the accessibility vertical. So this is the accessible beach pathway in Marina, and it will be useful if you could just move to the slide which has the pictures. Yes, yeah. So this is the project that I'm going to be talking about. It's a project that we first started working on in the year 2016. It took 6 years to get realized. And that speaks of the challenges of, getting inclusive infrastructure built in Indian cities. But I'll talk about a little bit about this as I walk you through the project. So this is Chennai's Marina Beach is one of the world's longest urban beaches, and the accessible beach pathway that you're seeing in the picture over here is, I'd say it's a radical gesture which is stretching across the sands of this beach. It's a permanent barrier-free boardwalk that extends to the high tide line and enables persons with disabilities to experience the sea with dignity, independence, and joy. So the project was commissioned by the urban local body, which is the Greater Chennai Corporation. And it was actually built on the momentum of earlier temporary installations for the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, which, like the city like used to celebrate this like by laying out like temporary mats on the beach. And I have to point out that, the Marina Beach is the city's largest public open space. It's free, it's accessible to everyone. It's literally like one of the largest lawn spaces of the city. And therefore, it was important as a gesture to have this made accessible to persons with disabilities. And this was done, as I said, through temporary installations. This project, as I said, was built on the momentum of those installations, but is it really grounded in the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, which was passed by the central government, the national government of India. The site that we chose for this project was very strategic, and of course the symbolic significance of being situated on the city's largest public open space. But also because it's adjacent to the State Commissionerate for the welfare of the differently abled, which is the welfare entity of the state of Tamil Nadu for persons with disabilities. And also adjacent to the Museum of Possibilities, which is the state's first inclusive museum, complete with a cafe, which is also operated by persons with disabilities. So you see that, all of this coming together creates a very unique ecosystem of accessibility and agency in the heart of the city's coastline. We like to sort of call this the accessible quarter. Of course, it's all within a quarter-mile radius. So the location is also, of course, emphasizes the narrative of inclusive urbanism that Chennai has embarked on. But the boardwalk itself was co-created with the Disability Rights Alliance, which is an activist group comprised of persons with disabilities in the city, and particularly the Chennai chapter of it. The DRA, the Disability Rights Alliance, do exist across the country. The Chennai chapter were, very instrumental in, pushing for the, actual realization of the project. And therefore, I'd say that the project, the boardwalk, represents a sort of a powerful shift in how cities engage with public infrastructure. So in a sense, it's not just about being, a mere provision, under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, but also, it was an act of inclusion, a poetic act of inclusion, rather. So the collaboration with the Disability Rights Alliance led to significant design refinements. We did on-site trials. There were feedback loops. A lot of this process also happened through COVID. So it was, with all the safety protocols as well in place. So we, it helped to ensure that the structure accommodated diverse disabilities, from wheelchair users to crutch users to individuals with visual impairments, as well as seniors with orthopedic issues. At the end, I'd say its implementation has, in a sense, sparked national conversations on accessibility in public spaces, because this set a precedent for future inclusive coastal projects across the country as well. Also, I think, some of the, the bonuses were that the project brought together not just communities of persons with disabilities, but also, beach vendors, municipal engineers, who took an interest in, inclusive design, and as well as curious, like, maybe onlookers on the beach also, who became unlikely allies. Fisher folk whom we consulted to ascertain high tide lines, all of them, I think, the project, I would say, became a sort of a quiet revolution that reimagined how the beach can be, not just a destination, but as a right, like a right to be. So I think that was a snapshot. Like what I spoke about until now was the sort of the policy framework within which the project was situated, as well as how it was the collaborative aspect of it. But there was a very critical other third part, which is the ecological responsiveness. And the entire onus of this was largely on us as architects, urban designers. So the boardwalk was designed as a very light touch intervention. It's we because we didn't want to while we were trying to meet a social need for the city, but we also were very critical about not wanting to disturb the beach's fragile ecological systems. So we had the sandy substrate, there's a high water table, and then we also had the coastal regulation zone classification, which really sort of shaped the way we conceptualized the physicality of this project. So for the benefit of those that may not know what the coastal regulation zone India is, it's a regulatory framework which was established with three purposes. One was environmental protection, which is to safeguard sensitive coastal ecosystems. The second part was disaster mitigation, is to minimize the impact of cyclones and other natural disasters along the coast. And the third purpose was sustainable development, to balance development activities and the need to conserve coastal resources as well as livelihoods, coastal livelihoods of fisher communities and so on. So some of the critical things that one would need to know about the CRZ is the high tide line, which is the landward limit of the coastal zone regulation, which is it's typically the highest point reached by the tide, and then the low tide line, which is the lowest level of the tide. And then there's the classifications and the regulations that accompany these classifications. So there are 4 CRZ classifications from 1 to 4, CRZ 1 to 4. And these are based on ecological sensitivity and and the corresponding development regulations that go with it. Specific activities are restricted or prohibited within these coastal zone, the 1 to 4 categories, including construction, waste disposal, industrial activities, and so on. The CRZ was initially declared in 1991, but we've had several amendments since. So our site for the boardwalk actually fell on a CRZ1, which is the most sensitive category. That really kind of shaped, as I said, the physicality of the project. So this 190-meter long boardwalk was constructed using durable, non-endangered timber as per the IUCN notifications. And and then we also studied about 40 international precedents for boardwalks along coastal zones, and eventually distilled all of these practices from a point of view of modularity and user comfort. We then reinterpreted all of these precedents that we looked at within India's coastal zone regulation context, and came up with the design that we came up with. So our entire structure rests on babul wooden pegs. It's a locally available non-endangered hardwood known for its strength and marine durability. And these are driven into the sand at regular intervals. So one of the conditions of CRZ 1A is that you can't use concrete or steel or any such permanent materials. So we use these wooden pegs. And where additional load distribution was required, we supported it with horizontal deadman supports as well. This was to, because there's, the soil displacement, the sand displacement from the wind. So in order to balance that out, we had to.
Sorry, Vidya. Can I wrap up in a minute? You can also.
Yeah, I will. I'm done. Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah. And then the decking was made from Ipe hardwood. It's a species selected for its splinter resistance, low moisture absorption, and natural resistance to fungi, ocean water, and borers. This ensures longevity with minimal maintenance as well. And we also used wood plastic composite for handrails and edging strips. And this was chosen for its low VOC content and durability under marine exposure. Additionally, the design was also shaped around the olive ridley turtle nesting season, which is from January to April. And we carefully avoided nesting zones and committed to a modular system that could be removed or reconfigured if ecological patterns shift with regard to their nesting zones. Yeah, I think what we wanted to do with this project was to show that inclusive design and environmental stewardship must coexist. I think that's really what was, I mean, as from a design ethos perspective, that's the point that we were trying to make. So in conclusion, I'd say that the project reimagines what public infrastructure can be. It's like a civil right that was made visible, essentially, and it challenges the norms of practice and positions design as an agent of systemic inclusion rather than an aesthetic afterthought. I'll stop with that, Bala.
Thank you so much, Vidya. Apologies, like we really wish we have more time to
Yeah,
discuss it.
I know.
But
I have to leave as well.
no worries. I also encourage all our audience to check out about this project more online. If there are any links, please share that in the chat as well for them to look up for. So now we heard about planning processes and pilot projects. I would like to now move ahead with Pragya to understand how this all works in a much more at the governance level, where she works with the national government of Nepal. How does UN Habitat work with the local governments in Nepal? And what are the challenges that you see in embedding inclusion and resilience within the policies and projects, both at the national level as well as at the local level? What tools are available? Could you share about that?
Thank you, Bala. And I just want to focus on three major challenges. While we know that there are a lot of challenges, and also how we've tried to address them, noting that there's so much more to do. The first challenge that we have faced while we are working in this sector is in terms of awareness and sensitivity, because the preconception of the governments, both at the national and local level, is disabilities associated with physical disability, and within the physical disability, it is then limited to wheelchair accessibility and the provisioning of ramp that would cater to all the needs or the requirements of the persons with disability. So we had to actually work on rather changing the narrative and changing their understanding from the wheelchair focused provisioning to a wide spectrum of disabilities that are also recognized even by the government, but not fully made aware to the wide sectoral agencies working in it. So it was an effort that was put in place to sensitize. At the local level, we had organized the peer-to-peer learning exchange between the cities, awareness campaigns with children's, the clubs, and so forth. But I think one of the most useful or one of the most impactful intervention that we did was to give them hands-on engagement through the accessibility audit. Sorry, I think there's some background noise. Apologies, but my office is right across the road. So the hands-on engagement in terms of doing the accessibility audit it's in itself by engaging the municipal officials, the designers, in which we not only engaged them and we not only limited it to the municipal officials, but we actually facilitated the National Disabled Federation of Nepal to lead the entire process and engage the Disability Council of the municipalities, and including the Society of Nepalese Architects and the universities who are the professional designers into the entire process, because the value chain and the sensitivity needs to scale down to or transcend to the bottom level where the work actually starts or initiates. And in the entire process, we made them realize how the infrastructures, particularly the municipal buildings and the adjoining ward offices, were audited, and it was a realization that how the municipalities' service provisioning, public service units were not accessible to persons with disability. It did not cater to the requirement of persons with disability, and it actually excluded the persons with disability to access to service and opportunities. And it was not only a physical accessibility that was audited, it was also the digital accessibility aspect, but also in terms of social and environmental aspects that were also considered when we were doing the audit. So it was a very fruitful mechanism in terms of engaging the decision makers into the audit process. But another challenge that we had was to bring this awareness into action, in which the next challenge was into bringing up or building their capacity in terms of designing the projects with the design elements that caters to the requirements, but also seeing it through in implementation through monitoring and effective actualization, in which we again brought in the audit data, but also brought in the climate risk vulnerability assessment data to see how we can co-design with the communities together with the municipal stakeholders on a public project that can be co-designed with full participation of the communities, particularly from marginalized communities and persons with disabilities, in designing the shape and shaping the spaces around them. So that was also an impactful approach of co-designing that we took. And also we also helped in preparing design templates for public service units, for example, public toilets, demonstrating climate responsive public infrastructures and so forth. But we see there's still a lot of technical gap in terms of the ability of the municipal officials, even the designers, into integrating the design principles, the universal design principles into the project design, and to see its implementation, because these are not taught in our architectural courses per se. And so there's no kind of awareness, but also capacity. So that's the aspect that we see a lot of challenge still existing. And with evolving impact of climate change and its extreme impact in the communities, we see there's a lot of need to build capacity in terms of climate responsive development, where the local governments and the national governments are actually stretched into coping with these disasters. And the third and the most important challenge that we have kind of realized is the need for a mind shift, because actually the approach for inclusivity and inclusive designing is thought from a welfare model. It's still needs to be a human, the human right based approach still needs to be integrated into and built into our system. So that's where I think there are a lot of emphasis needs to be in terms of how we can integrate inclusion and climate responsive approach into investments, into projects with a strong vetting mechanism in terms of markers, so that whenever an investment is made, whenever a public services or public infrastructures are being built, it caters to the needs of persons with disability. It has inclusion at its core, and it's also climate responsive. And I think only through this vetting mechanism, and if it's linked to performance-based budgeting, then we can see a stronger implementation of these local and national policies. So just highlighting three challenges for now.
Thank you so much, Pradya. Thanks a lot for also highlighting the challenge from the capacity perspective, the need to train even architects and city practitioners on inclusive design and co-creation. I would also like to kind of highlight, one of our participants has mentioned why it's important to also train people with disabilities to be involved more actively in the climate change and emergency sector. So their expertise also could become part of the solutions itself. So thanks a lot. Also conscious of time. We have a couple of questions. Maybe we can just directly get into the questions now. Maybe Emma, I think you can answer this question. This is also coming from the UK context related to the floating bus stops. So how do we work around such a challenge, which is very commonly being raised in UK? Do you have any thoughts around the floating bus stops and how that becomes challenging for blind people, especially, to use the floats?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that is the answer to kind of a lot of these issues, really, in the sense that we just need better understanding of the needs of disabled people across the kind of climate sector. Because I think there's no reason why any of this work has to be done in an accessible way. It's just there's people just aren't thinking about disabled people. Like I feel in like a UK context, the environmental sector is what it needs to do a lot more, but it's kind of caught on to the fact that we need to include people from the global majority within making sure their needs are thought about and solutions, but disabled people are just largely still left out of the conversation. So it's just a matter of like really raising our voices, saying, look, disabled people need to be included in this as well, and work with us on it, understand our needs, understand our expertise, and then we can be as the vision is, as GDI's kind of work has been saying, you know, this is an opportunity to make our society more accessible at the same time as we make it more resilient. But for that to happen, disabled voices need to be in the room.
Sure. Thank you, Emma. The next question probably I directed to Vidya. I think it's more directed to you, I guess. I think there is appreciation for the Chennai project. And the question is, could you highlight on some of the accomplices of this project in India who supported people with disabilities? Could you speak about the stakeholders briefly and who supported the project, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for the shout out about it. The project, as I said, it took 6 years, and one of the major hurdles was the CRZ clearance. And I think the fact that there was no precedent for a project like this in the country. Like every time I went for a meeting, the only question they would ask is, has this been done anywhere else in India? And I'd be like, no, this is the first time they're going to do it, and Chennai could be a forerunner in it. And I think that's worth something, to take that leap and set a precedent rather than wait for someone else to do it and just follow in the footsteps. But yeah, it took 3 years of convincing. And so the procedure for the clearance was that we had to first go to the state level authority for the coastal zone regulation. And they refused to give a clearance because for the same reason. They said there was no precedent and we don't want to be the first ones to do it. So they sent us to the center. So the project then had to go to the central government for clearance. And oddly enough, when it went for hearing at the central government, they actually reprimanded the state for not clearing it at the state level itself. A bit of an anticlimax over there. But in terms of what it has accomplished, I think it's really given the city a lot of confidence to do this. They've very quickly sanctioned another project on the Besant Nagar beach, which is another beach south of the Marina Beach, where it's a shorter stretch. What we did here was 190 meters. That's a much shorter stretch. It's about 120 meters or so. But they were very, it really built a lot of confidence with the urban local body to go ahead and do more of this. And in fact, they're taking up more initiatives in terms of sustainable, inclusive transportation infrastructure and pushing the agenda with streets as well. In fact, in October, I conducted a training program for all the engineers at the Greater Chennai Corporation on inclusive street design and inclusive bus shelter design specifically. So it's led to a lot of opening up of discourse on disability inclusion in public infrastructure. I think that's a really, really big win for the city.
Thank you, Vidya. Conscious of time again, but then a last question to Pragya to briefly ask you you have worked with multiple municipalities. Assuming, let's say, you have to start working on inclusive design and accessibility to the new municipality, what do you think is the most impactful entry point? A lot of city practitioners are listening to this webinar. So what do you suggest as the key entry point for them to start their work?
I think the key entry point would be to work with the OPDs. For us, we have had examples in one of our target municipalities where the municipalities had established disability council that had direct access to the municipal council as well. I think working with the OPDs would be the right entry point. But while working with the OPDs, we also need to be aware that in terms of bringing together the OPDs, we also, as I also read it from the comments, that is also building the capacity to engage in the process with the municipalities so that the engagement becomes meaningful and so that they can also so that their voices are making meaningful impact in terms of reflected through municipal planning and budgetary process. So the entire process of engagement into this planning process would be critical for the OPDs and the persons of disability. And that's where we need to build their capacity in making this engagement meaningful. But besides that, we also need to equally work actually with the municipalities, building their awareness, building their capacity. And when we are working in municipality, we work in a shared space. And with limited time and limited resources, and there are multiple issues that we need to tackle. So when we are working with the municipalities, we need to see that how we embed disability inclusion into the entire municipal planning process. So I think the reviewing of the planning process to see the entry points for disability inclusion will be the third aspect that we need to focus on, so that our equation is beyond 1 + 1 = 2 to more. So that's where I want to conclude.
Thank you so much, Pragya. I think thanks a lot. Thanks to our audience as well for asking such great questions and helping us with this discussion. With this, we have come to an end of this webinar. As I earlier mentioned, the recording of this session will be soon uploaded in GDA Hub's YouTube channel. It will be available in the next 3 to 5 days. And we'll also be publishing a blog capturing key insights shared in this session. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your generous time and contribution. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.